Coldplay are absolutely one of rock's biggest bands at the moment.
They're not flashy and they don't seem like celebrities, but actually they have reached, all corners of the world and have been really, really successful in the last 20 years.
Coldplay are 4 former students who took over the world by mistake.
Coldplay are effectively the triumph of the geeks. They're the underdogs who've become top dogs.
If you look at Coldplay's commercial and musical and cultural influence, there's absolutely no doubt that they're one of the most important bands of the last 20 years. Coldplay, as a group, all come from quite privileged backgrounds. They're all also musicians from childhood.
Quite a normal bunch, the Coldplay boys. No rebels at school, just kind of seemed like very, very nice boys who had kind of stable, nice backgrounds.
Chris Martin is the son of an accountant who went to private school. Will Champion is the son of a couple of professors. And the other two are all from very solid backgrounds. They're not a band from the ghetto.
There's none of that kind of struggle and torture that influence them to create music. And in that way, I suppose that's kind of reflected by what they've then created musically.
A very kind of sedate upbringings, I think, Coldplay. Yeah, no skeletons in those closets.
Founder members Chris Martin and Johnny Buckland started the band under the name Pectorals while studying together in London during the mid-1990s.
Chris Martin and Jerry Buckland actually met in 1996 at University College London on their induction week, and they later brought on the other members of the band as well.
The last one to join was the drummer, Will. He was kind of brought on and he couldn't actually play the drums when he joined the band, which I like. He played other instruments but had never touched the drums before, so he was brought on as the drummer.
From there, they started playing small gigs. But there's 2 other things about Coldplay at this point. One, they waited a whole year before they did anything. And this isn't laziness, they were plotting and scheming. The other thing is that of the 4 of them, only Guy Berryman dropped out of university. The rest, although they'd met in the very first week, stayed to take their degrees and their finals.
Having settled on Coldplay as the new name for the band, and with their lineup now complete, the group began to release material, citing bands such as U2, Oasis, Radiohead and Travis as major influences on their work.
Well, Coldplay have always been a band who've worn their influences very much on the sleeve.
Everything from kind of Nick Cave to U2, there's quite a lot of those kind of sounds and influences coming through.
Echo and the Bunnymen in there, and you can hear there's some Kate Bush influence. But I think the key band to really understanding Coldplay are Travis. Travis really set the mode for the kind of music which was a singer who becomes this touchstone for male sensitivity, these sort of rather epic, grandiose, sweeping guitar arrangements, and everything put together in a kind of melancholic, slightly minor key way, but which is also catchy.
I wanna be bigger, stronger, drive a faster car.
In 1998, and while still studying at university, the band released their first EP titled Safety, which was followed up less than a year later by the 3-track Brothers and Sisters EP.
The Safety EP and the Brothers and Sisters EP, they're both incredibly rare.
Safety's particularly interesting because they only made a handful of copies and they were so pleased with the outcome that they actually went on to make 500 copies, which they mainly distributed to friends and family and also, of course, record labels. And there's only 50 or so left that actually went into record stores. And in fact now, that Safety EP isn't available. You can't get it anywhere, and copies go for around $2,000. It's incredibly valuable. It's a piece of music history.
On some songs such as Bigger Stronger from the Safety EP, Chris Martin's voice is as distinctive as it is today. You know who it is, it can't be anyone else. Johnny Buckland is doing these weird little guitar things in the background, and you can tell even then that he's not a bog standard indie guitarist.
After completing their final university exams, Coldplay signed to Parlophone, and the band went into the studio to record a third EP titled The Blue Room, which proved to be a difficult process for the group.
So it's been reported that when Coldplay record, it can get a bit fractious. There's quite a lot of rows. I think this all kind of started in their early recording sessions when they weren't quite gelling as a band and there was a bit of kind of friction there.
There are stories early on of Chris Martin and Will Champion falling out big time as well. Will actually being kicked out of the group, Chris Martin begging him to come back, all that kind of thing.
Well, you wouldn't have, if you listen to their music and also imagine the kind of people they are, sort of, non-confrontational, well brought up middle-class boys, you don't think of it as being fractious. But I think what they did, to give them their credit, is that although Chris Martin is undoubtedly the sort of, the driving force in many ways, I think they always had a kind of approach where they'll all contribute.
Much as it's perceived as being Chris Martin and band, they're not. They're a proper band, and they're run as a democracy, just as much as U2 are, just as much as late period Queen was too. There's 4 of them, and they've all got competing egos, different ideas, and this means that when they go into the studio, that tensions arise. Everything that they do is argued through, and this is why they take so long. And this is why they appear, unlike other major bands, completely drained when they actually release an album, because they've gone through this purgatory of recording.
Having had moderate chart success with the song Shiver in March 2000, it would be the second single taken from their upcoming debut album Parachutes that would prove to be their breakthrough hit.
Look at the stars, look how they shine for you. And everything you do, yeah, they were all yellow.
Yellow was Coldplay's first big hit, went top 5 in the UK. And for me, it's one of my favourite Coldplay tracks. I really like that early sound they have that's a little bit Radiohead in sound, and I think that's kind of, they were compared to them quite a lot at that time.
I do have my reservations about Coldplay, but I would say that Yellow is a fantastic song. I remember watching the video of him wandering around the beach in some horrible anorak or something. I was thinking, wow, this is a new definition of the word rock star.
And it was all yellow.
If you look back at it now, it's incredible to see Chris Martin looking so fresh-faced and young, but it's essentially him walking down a beach at that time of day where night becomes the morning. It's actually very beautifully shot as well, and the song is a touching one, and I know one that moved many people as well.
An anthem of the noughties, isn't it? I'm sure, kind of many people have got married to that song. It was a big breakthrough for them.
Yellow was the moment people started taking notice of Coldplay, and it established 2 things, all about Chris Martin. One, because the rest of the band weren't in the video, it popularised the myth that Coldplay are the Chris Martin band. And the other thing is that it established Chris Martin's sort of geeky, earnest persona. And it's a persona that he's never quite shed. And I also think he's never shown any interest in wanting to shed it. That this ruthlessly ambitious, incredibly intelligent man, if he's seen as a bit geekish, it gives him a little bit of slack, I think.
And it was all yellow.
In July 2000, with 2 top 40 singles under their belt, Coldplay released their much-anticipated debut album, Parachutes.
Coldplay's first album, Parachutes, was a huge hit for them. Went to #1, it got nominated for a Mercury, which is pretty impressive with a debut album. And it had that kind of feel of what the band wanted to do.
Parachutes was a huge success. I remember when it came out, and it felt like there was a kind of movement in music at that point that was, you know, kind of British, you know, solid, you know, songwriting was at the fore. Not the most interesting of music at that point, but solid. And it really informed a lot of kind of music after that.
It was a new kind of indie rock album, because before then, the idea with indie music is it was meant to be a sort of alternative to whatever's going on in the mainstream. And Coldplay were the first band who, on a major level, on a world level, took all the tenets of indie, of that kind of underconfidence, and put it out into stadiums.
Their music became, believe it or not, more upbeat as they evolved. But on that Parachutes album, it's incredibly introspective and reflective. Parachutes is the seminal Coldplay album as far as I'm concerned.
The album was also critically well received in the United States and earned the band a 2002 Grammy Award for Best Alternative Music Album.
Well, it was a surprise, really, that Parachutes was so successful in America. I mean, it ended up double platinum, but it was a slow burner.
Coldplay, I think, had a big work ethic. That's one of the things that really got them. It wasn't just the kind of music they were making. They were completely prepared to go out there and meet the local radio DJ in the afternoon and, you know, sign copies and go to the record store and do everything they could.
There's always been a gap in the American market for a fairly sensitive British man. Chris Martin was that man.
They are a British band, but they always aim for more than that, I think. They have a universal sound, a sound that people across the world connect with, and I think that's something they wanted from the beginning. They were ambitious from the start.
Look how they shine for you, and all the things that you do.
You saved $400.
The greatest albums ever made.
You boys and girls.
The Clash on the next Rock Legends, next Wednesday at 8 Eastern on AXSTV.
After the success of Parachutes, Coldplay returned to the studio in 2001 to begin work on their second album, A Rush of Blood to the Head.
Coldplay's second album, A Rush of Blood to the Head, had a slightly heavier sound to it and more commercially appealing songs as well.
Rush of Blood to the Head as well was voted in 2013 the best album of all time in a BBC Radio 2 poll, and it feels like a much more grown-up version of Coldplay compared to Parachutes.
It was recorded under slightly strange circumstances. They were working in London. It didn't really, nothing was coming together. It wasn't gelling. And they pretty much, I believe, scrapped an entire album, and it was almost make or break. They reconvened to Liverpool, and this was post 9/11. So I think their mood, as the mood of everyone, was sort of altered by that event.
I think it really showed Chris Martin was moving more into expressing himself emotionally, like with his lyrics. The songs sounded bigger somehow. They were kind of just less, you know, they sounded less of a kind of baby band. It was them growing into their sound, I think, that record.
On A Rush of Blood, they had the same personnel, the same producer, the same musicality, but they were just doing everything better. For them, it was a giant leap forwards.
During the band's early years, Coldplay became widely known in the media for giving 10% of their profits to charity. The band has continued to support various charities and take part in political activism throughout their careers.
I think Coldplay's activism and you know, giving their money to charity is a really interesting angle to what they do. It makes them feel very modern. And it's kind of like created this whole, it's like ethical rock music, you know, it's kind of, but it's not annoying. You know, sometimes Bono's can be quite irritating, but Chris just seems quite kind of he does it, but it's not in your face, and they just get on with it. And I think that's quite inspirational for a lot of other artists as well.
Chris Martin and Coldplay are very charitably minded, and from very early on as well have used the platform that they have to draw people's attention to issues that they care about, particularly free trade. That's something that obviously the band place a very, very high priority on. They give 10% of their profits to charity as well. Now, obviously other groups have done things like this before, but it's a nice thing that Coldplay use that platform in that way.
There's always been a sense of activism around Coldplay, and of course the danger of this is that they become rent-a-celeb when there's any global campaign of awareness going. But it's part of their overall vision to be more than just a band.
You go and see Coldplay or whatever, and you see, and they will have these stands everywhere and these posters and stuff, and you think, well, that's better than just taking, you know, just selling your music for bank adverts or whatever.
Chris Martin has for years been a kind of ambassador for free trade and brought it to the forefront by making sure that he kind of mentions it and keeps it in the public spotlight, like when he's performing at Glastonbury or doing interviews. You know, it's really important to him to make those issues very, very open and make sure people are aware of them.
I think what's happened with Coldplay is that they made very commercial music. You know, it started off much more personal, and they found a way to sort of get it out to the world and do a kind of, yeah, sort of a corporate version of indie rock. Having said that, they've decided to use their position as in the best way they can. And so, you know, I think it's pretty positive, really.
Coldplay would cement their sound with the third single to be taken from A Rush of Blood to the Head, which also gave the band yet another UK top 10 hit.
Lights go out and I can't be saved. Tides that I tried to swim against.
When Coldplay released Clocks from the second album, I think it was, although not a major departure, you can hear the band becoming a lot more confident and focused on what their sound is and who they are. And I think that's quite clear, that kind of change from first to second album.
From the moment that Chris Martin's piano kicks in, it's a different band. They were no longer indie, it's not an indie song. And they were taking musical chances. And this is something else that would happen with Coldplay, that whenever they took chances, it would usually work and they would be better.
It's a kind of typical Coldplay song in the sense that it's not really a song at all. It's actually a very, very memorable riff. And in this case, it's a piano riff. You know, generally it's a guitar riff, but it's not, it's a piano riff. So you have that running through the whole thing. It's something different. It's almost like just a single idea upon which everything else is hung. It does work really well.
It just feels like they really know who they are. That's the moment that Coldplay, for me, kind of really cement their image.
If Rush of Blood to the Head had cemented their sound, it would be the success of their next album, X and Y, that would establish them as the world's biggest band.
X and Y was where they changed things a little bit. They changed producer. It had Fix You, the song which Chris Martin wrote for his girlfriend stroke wife, Gwyneth Paltrow, who was grieving from the death of her father. It's a proper comforting song. It had the brilliant talk on it. And it was the suggestion that now Coldplay were major, major players.
Tears stream down your face when you lose something you cannot replace.
With the release of X and Y in 2005, I think Coldplay were without doubt the world's biggest band at that moment. It was huge for a British band to have so much global appeal. And I think it was the third fastest selling record in the UK ever. It was just incredible. They were everywhere. And there was no denying their success at that point.
Well, Chris Martin said early on in Coldplay's career that the idea was to be the biggest and the best band in the world. Now, when X and Y came out in 2005, if that kind of thing is quantifiable at all, then they were.
They'd kind of, at that point, grown into the stadium band. They always looked quite kind of shy and nervous, and it felt kind of funny seeing them in that position because they're really unassuming guys. They don't look like rock stars particularly, but everyone was connecting with these songs around the world, and they looked kind of humbled by it, and it was kind of nice to see.
The track Talk would be the third single to come from the album X and Y. The band decided to sample the riff from Kraftwerk's Computer Love.
Oh, brother, I can't get through. I've been trying hard to reach you 'cause I don't know what to do.
The single Talk had that riff that they'd borrowed from Kraftwerk. From Computer Love, except they kind of reworked it by using it as a guitar riff instead of a synth sound.
The tale goes that Chris Martin, who has got very poor quality schoolboy German, sent a letter in his very poor quality schoolboy German to Kraftwerk and said, do you mind if we use your chorus from Computer Love? And there are either two stories for this. They either replied very politely at great length, saying, yes, of course you can, thank you very much, and we're really pleased that you've actually asked us, very polite of you. Or, the one which I'd much rather believe, is that they just sent a one-word answer, yes.
Talk is a little bit more fun. We all associate Coldplay with being quite serious and reflective and often quite po-faced as well, I think. This video is a bit more of a laugh.
I think it's a really fun song, and that's also reflected in the video, which is like this strange kind of B-movie style where they're in outer space being chased by an alien robot. It's quite fun, and it gives them a chance to be a bit more kind of comedic and tongue-in-cheek and maybe not take themselves quite so seriously.
Talk was the one, as far as I remember, where they are arriving in a UFO wearing 3D glasses, and then they go into this kind of rather sort of B-movie sci-fi universe and sort of stumble about the place and then encounter a giant robot, which Chris Martin jumps on or something. So it's actually a really good video.
Although Coldplay have found worldwide chart success easy to come by, Chris Martin has often been criticised for the perceived lack of quality to his lyrics.
It has been said that Chris Martin's lyrics are the band's weak link. I think Chris Martin himself has even said that Coldplay don't have the best lyrics. I think they're quite honest. The thing about the way Chris Martin writes is he just kind of writes what he feels. So, I don't know if you can really criticise that.
Well, after Parachutes, Chris Martin's uncle apparently took him aside and said, you're very rich, you're very famous, but your lyrics are rubbish. Chris Martin's response is, yes, but people really like Yellow. His uncle said, yeah, but what is it about? And I think Chris Martin was actually quite dumbfounded by this because he couldn't really say what it's about. And he's always been a very vague lyricist.
Confusion never stops, closing walls and ticking clocks. I mean, you could kind of imagine it on, you could definitely imagine it on a sort of bank, an advert for a bank where they have a lot of people looking kind of a bit sad and then looking really, really happy as they get their mortgage. Or you could imagine it on one of those Guinness ads where, everyone is, completely and utterly pretentious and someone wins lots of awards for it. It's that kind of thing. It doesn't mean anything. But that's why it's so successful. Because if it meant something really personal, then 3/4 of the world wouldn't understand the reference.
I think it's a little unfair that Chris is kind of picked out for his weak lyrics. I think he's quite direct with his songwriting, but he's never kind of claimed to be a poet or anything. And you know, you can say what you want about the songs, but people obviously connect with them. You could be the greatest lyric writer and not connect with anybody. So actually, you know, it's a strength in some ways for him.
Because he's vague and he is a very self-absorbed lyricist too, this gives people who listen to his lyrics the opportunity to kind of pin their own personality traits on it. So you can take almost any meaning you wish from most Chris Martin songs.
Every Friday night, the
White snow. Clearly I remember from the windows they were watching while we froze down below.
For the recording of the band's fourth album, Coldplay enlisted the help of legendary producer Brian Eno. The recording process would see the band experiment with new sounds and ideas.
You better lie low if you love me.
I think Brian Eno as a producer on this record just kind of pushed the band to try different things, to experiment with song structure and with different sounds, stuff they hadn't done before. Those records have a lot of space in them, and I think he kind of pushed them to work in a completely different ways. I think they needed it at that point as well. And Brian Eno is hugely accomplished. You know, he's made some of the best records in British music. So he knew about kind of trying to push yourselves as a band, and that's what he did with them with this record.
In his production work, Brian Eno tends to stretch people. And this came at a moment when Coldplay really needed stretching. They were the biggest band in the world, but they'd really admired his solo work, his ambient work, and what he'd done with U2. So it was an ideal combination for them.
The tales, the stories that came out of the studio sessions sound very interesting. Like the time that Brian Eno brought a hypnotist in to hypnotise the whole band as a way to get them to express themselves and find song themes and lyrics. And the band said they weren't sure it worked, but it was an interesting process.
It's a very produced album. It wasn't just him. You know, there's a whole bunch of producers on that album, and it does sound like, to me, it's too slick for my tastes. It doesn't sound hugely different, but you know, I can see that it's a producer. In a way, you could say it's a producer's album.
When they were working on Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends, they were actually touring Latin America at the time, and you can really tell in the sound of the album. It's actually my favourite piece of work from Coldplay. It's upbeat and it's fun, and it does have that Latin American sensibility in it as well. That can definitely be heard.
He wanted to make this the biggest, boldest, brightest Coldplay record imaginable. And of course they chafed a bit, because there's still part of them, I think, that just wants to do yellow. But when Eno and Coldplay came together, the results were fantastic.
Viva La Vida would be a worldwide success for the band and go on to be the best-selling album of 2008 and later win Best Rock Album at the 2009 Grammys.
Would sing. Now the old king is dead, long live the king. 1 minute I
The title track from the album would be Coldplay's first #1 single in both the US and the UK, and also win the band their second 2009 Grammy for Song of the Year.
pillars of sand. I hear Jerusalem bells are ringing. Roman cavalry choirs are singing. Be my mirror, my sword and shield. My missionaries in a foreign field.
Viva La Vida was a huge hit for Coldplay and got them their first #1 on the Billboard Top 100. So that was obviously a really important moment for them as a band to have that success in America like that.
I love Viva La Vida. It's a great song, and it's so euphoric. There's that bit at the end when, you know, the crowd kind of can kick in and sing the rest of the song. It builds and builds. Strings are beautiful. It's a beautifully constructed piece of music.
It was the wicked and wild wind blew down the doors to let me in.
I don't think Viva La Vida is their best song. I think the best song is probably Trouble, which is off Parachutes. And I think the reason that's such a good song is because it really does have genuine emotion rather than the kind of facsimile of emotion that they learned to produce.
I think Viva La Vida is the greatest Coldplay song. Something like that which is upbeat and also feels sweeping and epic really, really does resonate with me personally, and I know it did with a lot of people who maybe weren't the biggest Coldplay fans in the first place. I actually think that helped them bridge a gap.
I think Viva La Vida is just such a joyful song. It's got this intellectual background. It's all based around Frida Kahlo, and it's about the French Revolution too. So you can take whatever you want from it, but it's got this soaring, whoa, whoa, whoa chorus that when crowds are leaving Coldplay concerts, they're still singing it. And it sends shivers down the spine when this happens, and it does when they're playing it. And it's so percussive and so primal that you'd never imagined this was the band who was doing all the wimpy stuff before. It's raw.
Now one of the biggest bands in the world, and with a string of hit singles under their belt, Coldplay's attention turned to the production of their live shows. Tours would go on to involve huge stages and lavish light shows, with state-of-the-art technology eventually helping Coldplay to win a Brit Award for Best Live Act in 2013.
Just because I'm hurt doesn't mean I'm hurt.
I have seen Coldplay live, actually. I saw them way back on the Parachutes tour, and it was really stripped down. Chris Martin looked scared to be on stage, and they had this really subdued performance. And then I saw them a couple of years ago, and wow, what a difference. You know, the stage show is ramped up into this huge spectacle. There's fireworks going off. There's, you know, it's massive production now. So it's really nice to see how they've progressed. They look comfortable on stage, finally. So I think that's, yeah, it's great. They're one of the greatest rock bands, you know, live, definitely.
They're a band who understand how to fill the space, and that's what they have in common with U2. They have an ability to make an arena or even a stadium feel quite intimate, and the music is completely tied in with putting on a big show. So everything is locked in. So the light, you know, the lights, and they'll have fireworks and everything. It's all very tightly choreographed. It doesn't seem like a little band up on stage. It seems like a big rock band up on stage who know exactly how to give a performance.
They're brilliant in an arena situation. They're a band for the larger stage. And that's because they have this knack of making this larger stage seem intimate, that they will jet off to the back of the hall and do duets with audience members, that they will bring everyone closer together. It's like we're all sitting around a giant campfire.
I saw Coldplay headline Glastonbury, one of the many times they've done it. I think they've headlined Glastonbury more than any other band in the festival's history, which shows, you know, what a great relationship they have with that festival. And seeing them play is such a huge field, but at the same time be quite intimate. It's quite an impressive feat. You know, Chris Martin can be just there with his piano, singing, and, you know, 100,000 people are silently watching, and that's pretty amazing.
The bigger the stage, the better and the more effective they are. And when they were touring Viva La Vida and they all wore French Revolutionary uniforms, it looked brilliant.
Just because I'm losing doesn't mean I'm lost. Oh man, we owe you big time. Thank you so much.
You saved $400 by switching to Mercury.
Look. The Clash on the next.
Boys and girls.
The Clash on the next Rock Legends, next Wednesday at 8 Eastern on Access TV.
I turn the music up, I got my records on, from underneath the...
For their fifth album, Milo Zalotto, Coldplay decided to work once again with Brian Eno on a concept album. It would receive positive reviews and chart success internationally.
The Milo Xylotto record is really bizarrely titled, clearly. There was a lot of kind of gossip at the time about what it was about. The band kind of threw red herrings into the press, made up loads of different things, and nobody really knew where it came from.
Milo Xylotto is obviously a strange album title, and that's because the album is a concept album. It's about a futuristic dystopia, an Orwellian society, if you like, in which sound and colour are kept repressed. And Milo and Xylotto are the two central characters in the album who try and battle against that force.
Milo is a boy and Xylotto is a girl. And I think initially Milo is sent out by the sort of shady government forces to destroy Xylotto because she's doing some sort of light laser graffiti or something like that. And then they fall in love and, love conquers all. Mind you, I only get that, I only know this because I've read about it. I would never, ever get any of that from listening to the lyrics, which don't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Paradise, the second single taken from the album, would see the band earn their second UK #1. The video that accompanied the track would go on to win Best Rock Video at the 2012 MTV Video Music Awards.
It was quite funny when Paradise won the Best Rock Video at the MTV Awards, because the story is that it was literally thrown together at the last minute. There would been another plan that was quite outlandish. They changed their mind, they got someone new in, and ended up filming wearing animal costumes and on unicycles. It seems like quite a strange concept for a video, but it won them some awards.
Paradise is a lovely video. Again, it shows the kind of band's sense of humour. They're all dressed up as elephants. And I like the idea of Chris dressed up as an elephant by himself. He kind of travels the world and then he finds the other 3 band members in the desert and they all play together. It's quite a cute kind of story. It's this kind of idea of like these misfits who are kind of wandering around, they all find each other, they create this great music, and then they're on stage together at the end in front of, thousands of people. It's kind of like a metaphor for the band. It's an allegory for what happened with them.
What I really liked about it is that it was really nice to have a break from watching Chris Martin jiggle about on a Coldplay video. But of course then he takes his hat off and it's Chris Martin, so there's no escape.
The song would feature in Coldplay's triumphant set at the closing ceremony for the 2012 Paralympic Games in London. The band would be joined on stage for the song by US hip-hop star Jay-Z, as well as Rihanna for the track Princess of China.
This closing ceremony performance at the Paralympics really kind of cemented their place as, one of the biggest bands in the world. I liked the way that they kind of used the para orchestra, but then they had Jay-Z and Rihanna as well. They just pulled out all the stops. And it was quite an emotional performance for a lot of people who are watching. It felt like the end of a really significant moment in history in terms of sport, but also culturally as well for Britain.
That was a moment for them to kind of really say, look, this is what we do and the world is watching. And also they were on that lineup alongside Rihanna and Jay-Z, really massive names in terms of American music and worldwide. So that was kind of putting them on the same platform as those other artists.
It's a very meaningful performance for Coldplay as well, and Chris Martin actually said it was incredibly important for him because obviously they met at University College London, so to come back on such a special occasion was huge for them. And of course, with it being the Paralympics closing ceremony, it was big, it was bombastic, there were dancers, performers of all kinds as well, and it is a pretty seminal Coldplay performance.
Effectively, they turned this ceremony into a Coldplay concert. It wasn't just an appearance, they were there for an hour and a half.
In May 2014, Coldplay released their 6th album titled Ghost Stories. Many believe that the themes of the album were inspired by Chris Martin's recent split with his wife, Gwyneth Paltrow.
When Ghost Stories came out, it was around the same time as when Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow announced their conscious uncoupling, or split, as normal people call it. And when you listened through to those songs, and especially to those lyrics, it did feel like it was very personally influenced by their breakup.
To pick apart what it is that is the message behind the album, it's essentially the idea of how the things and the people that you've met in your past affect you moving forward, and how you prevent them detracting from your life. This comes at a time as well when the band, but also Chris Martin in particular, were interested in all things spiritual. And he's actually said when he started that internal journey and trying to learn how to deal with that, that's when he felt that the music started to flow.
'Cause you're a sky, 'cause you're a sky full of stars. I'm gonna give you my heart.
It's a good record. It's a little bit stripped down, a bit more minimal than their previous stuff. They had John Hopkins on there producing, which was really interesting. And I think it was quite understated and subtle, but you know, I don't go back and listen to that one.
Ghost Stories I think it's an album of transition. And Coldplay haven't really done an album of transition before. They hardly toured it. Now that might be a result of Chris Martin getting divorced from Gwyneth Paltrow. Maybe it was as if they weren't really satisfied with it themselves. It sounds a bit muddled, and it sounds as though they're trying to change direction. And I think what they do next will be the really interesting moment in Coldplay's mid-term career.
I think Coldplay are influential in terms of their activism and the charity work that they do. I think that's something that's really useful for other bands to see. And I think they've probably made a lot of British bands realise that you need to have a kind of worldview, you need to have a universal sound to be successful everywhere. That's what they've done, they've mastered it.
In terms of just how they are, not necessarily musically, but as a band, as being that really successful British band, having that longevity, that is, you know, very influential to younger bands coming through.
Coldplay are influential because they took what was, let's face it, quite a small subgenre, British indie rock, and made it a global phenomenon.
Coldplay's influence has been quiet but effective because they are so big and they are in that stage of their career where maybe they haven't peaked. So their influence is going to take a little time to come through.
Musically, I think they've been very influential because that was really the band that made it seem... I mean, you've got to remember how hard it is to make a living in a kind of small rock band. You know, it's incredibly hard. And Coldplay made it seem like you can be a kind of guitar-playing band and be huge and, you know, do something that a lot of people connect with.
I don't think you can overemphasise how important he and the group have been to the modern artists, especially British artists that we see today.
Look how they shine for you. Look how they shine for you. Look how they shine. Look at the stars. Look how they shine for you. And all the things that you do.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Oh, did you want to?
Sorry, I'll let